Oh, good God.
Oh my gosh.
Welcome back, Mighty Vandals, to Tubbs at the Club, the Idaho Vandals affiliate on the Big Sky Podcast Network. I am your host, Dallas Hammer, returning from my, I don't know how many weeks sabbatical it's been, joined today by brave, bold Brian Marceau.
Nice to have the crew back here. We haven't had the whole group together as much as we're used to just throughout the year, but hey, whatever happens. Yeah, man. Good to be here. Taking a little break from football stuff because we got spring football not too far away. So we're kind of giving ourselves a little break. We'll get back into talking coaches, recruit, and all that as we close in on spring ball. But right now, man, it's basketball. Starch Madness time. So that's what I'm here for. I'm ready to go. Good to be here.
As Brian said, we're rounding the corner into Starch Madness and full team out tonight on Tuesday, Tubbs After Dark. It's producer redacted Martin Heemstra. Martin, how you doing, dude?
It's going good. It's another week closer to Starch Madness, and I'm in a pretty good mood right now.
And so thank you guys for carrying on the show the last couple of weeks while I was gone. I guess we took the 2 weeks ago off, whatever it was. It's been a long couple of weeks. Gentlemen, let's just jump right into it. Brian, you're the czar of the Idaho men's basketball team. 12-16 now on the season, 7-8 in conference after not a great weekend. Did get that win against Northern Arizona on Thursday, 83-78, but then got creamed by Northern Colorado on the road. 74-92 was the final in that one.
Yeah, so that's 12 wins for Idaho. That's the Idaho has not cracked that number of wins since the 2017-2018 season. So still need to to pick up a few more wins because, I think if Pribble were on the show, he would not say like, hey, like one win advancement each year. That's what we need. In like 30 years, we will make the tournament, right? But 12 wins isn't nothing. So, hey, what happened last week is Idaho had the road trip to Flagstaff and Greeley. Starting off Thursday against Northern Arizona, Idaho picks up an 83-78 win. Now, there was a little drama in this game. Idaho led by 18, 45-27 at the half. And the Vandals did their best to faceplant the game away, but made some key late plays, held on for that 5-point win. My man Tyler Lindhart, 25 points off the bench, 8 of 13 from the field, including 7 of 8 from the free throw line. Colton Mitchell, Jack Payne, and Christian Gonzalez all scored in double figures as well. Then Saturday against Northern Colorado, we had the same mirror of, hey, we had a real strong first half and a less strong second half. The problem was Idaho didn't lead by 18 at half against Northern Colorado. Idaho trailed by 1, which was actually astonishing. In that first half, Northern Colorado shot 70%, and Idaho trailed by 1. Well, that trend continued, though, at least Northern Colorado end, and the Bears won 92-74 in a game that felt like 92-14. Tyler Lindhart, another big outing, 9 of 14 from the field, 23 points off the bench. Then Julius Mims, Colton Mitchell each hit double figures. But Lindhart was kind of the big story to me offensively of those two games. But we're talking about like takeaways, because look, we know, we talked about it last week. The jury's in. This Idaho team is a pretty bad defensive team. For the Vandals to win games, they're going to be higher scoring affairs. That's fine. That's fun basketball. But against they allowed Northern Colorado to shoot over 60% from the field, 50% from three. Yeah, you beat no one doing that. So, hey, what does that point us towards heading into the Big Sky Conference tournament? The first thing I want to bring up is, as far as the trend, we've seen this for I think 3 of the last 4 games, 4 of the last 5 games, something like that. Idaho has been more aggressive at getting to the hoop and taking threes as complementary parts of the offense. My huge point of emphasis here: 1, if Tyler Lindhart's leading you in scoring like he did the last couple of games, that means you're getting the ball inside, because that's where Lindhart gets the majority of his points. But second, from the Northern Colorado game, Idaho shot, it was like 7 or 8 threes in the first half. I had a tweet about it. Idaho shot 7 or 8 threes in the first half, 20-ish 2-point attempts. That's a ratio, though we're not married to the ratio itself. What that's indicative of is treating the threes as not your primary source of offense, something that you happen to land on. Now, if Idaho can consistently do that, there's a lot of teams in the Big Sky that Idaho is going to be competitive with, talking Big Sky Conference tournament. And like, hey, flash forward, because there's three games left in the both men's and women's season. So the regular season will have concluded by the time we're back on here to record. For Idaho, those 3 games are Thursday, Idaho State in Moscow; Friday, Weber State in Moscow; Monday, Montana State in Bozeman. Now, I bring that up other than just that's the close of the season and there's matchups to look at, but Idaho State, and Montana State are 3 teams in that glut in the middle of the conference right now. So we have on the screen if you're a viewer, you see this. If you're a listener, we'll just narrate this. We have up right now, if the conference season ended today, what the Big Sky Conference tournament bracket would be. And I bring this up because they just said Idaho State, and Montana State. Those are 3 of the teams in that glut right now. If the tournament started today, Idaho State would be the number 3 seed in the conference, playing number 6 Montana State, which would leave Idaho as the number 5 seed playing number 4, aka top 5 Portland State. So those would be second round games, because if you're in the top 6, you get to skip the essential the play-in games that your bottom 4 seeds have. That means Idaho is set up to be essentially in that play-in game right now, but shift back to the conference standings, depending on how these games shake out, there's a lot that can change, because Portland State and Idaho State, that's your 3-4 right now, just depending on tiebreak. Both those teams are 8 and 7. Idaho and Montana State sit at 7 and 8. Northern Arizona 7 and 9, and still not completely out of the picture. Eastern at 6 and 9, maybe an ideal conference win-loss record. But that's 6 teams that are still in contention for the bottom half of that first round bye. There's a lot that's up for grabs in the final week of the Big Sky season, and a lot of the teams, they're playing each other. So this bracket we're talking about, we don't know the safest gamble is going to be, it's going to look slightly different than what we have here, with Montana probably number one, Northern Colorado probably number two. Those two teams have kind of differentiated themselves in the conference so far, but there's a lot to play for in this final week of the season, which hey, we say this each week pretty much, Dallas, but it at least feels nice that Idaho's in the discussion now. We know Idaho's not going to win the tournament, but Idaho's in the position where we're jockeying for seeds right now in a way that hasn't happened for a while. That's kind of fun. I mean, hey, they're a 500 team. They have flaws, but we're now at the point where Idaho's got a very good chance with I think a relatively preferable end of conference schedule. The Vandals have a chance. They need to go 2-1 in these last three. It's not unreasonable. You might say after the Idaho State getting their ass kicked in Pocatello, okay, but I mean, Idaho's playing a little bit different offensively, and I think there's going to be some revenge in Idaho's mind. I think we're just going to get the effort itself is going to be better. There's going to be more heart, I think, than we saw in Pocatello earlier this season. But 2-1 or going 3-0, that's on the table. And Idaho's really got to solidify. That's what Idaho can do to solidify their matchup. But I do got to say, before I throw it to you, Dallas, I'm looking at this conference bracket right now. Like we talked last week, hey, would we rather get a win or get a first round bye? Well, now that they're kind of thick in the discussion of first round bye, that's kind of where I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't want anything to do with Portland State. Portland State's been a terrible matchup for Idaho.
Yeah, not Portland State's been a bad matchup for Idaho for a couple of years now.
Which happens when you're top five.
Yeah, which happens when you're top five, and Idaho is definitively not top five. But Brian, when we started kind of this Tubbs 2.0 or 3.0 or whatever the hell number you want to call it, when you spun off this basketball show and I started helping you out with it during the beginning days of COVID, we were so far away from the point we are right now. And yes, Idaho, we're talking about a team that's 12-16 is going to need help to finish above 500, is going to need help to finish at 500 in conference. But if things break correctly, Idaho could fall ass backwards into the 3 seed, Brian. And that's amazing to me.
If Idaho goes 2-1 to close the season, they're at 500 in conference.
Mm-hmm. Which again, but what I mean is you got to go 3-0. You're probably going to need some serious help. When was the last time Idaho won 3 games in a row? So you're going to need some help to make it above 500 in conference play. But again, Idaho State, yeah, that first matchup was rough, but you're back at home. You've got Weber State at home for senior day. Weber State is not particularly good. They need Dylan Jones and honestly Dame Lillard to turn that team back around. But Brian, it's weird to sit here and think and be able to say, hey, yeah, okay, yeah, this team is certainly flawed. I know Tyler Linhart is your boy. You've been a huge fan for a very long time. He's scores a ton of points, doesn't obviously start because this team is defensively about a team of you and me out there. But Brian, we are not talking at the end of the season about, wow, it'd be really cool if Idaho got to double-digit wins, or hey, what if Idaho made it to whatever ridiculous benchmark we were setting for. This team is so far into the cellar, we have to find some way to make this fun. No, we're in the final week of the season, and this team could make a first-round bye. This team might be able to win a game in Boise, Brian.
So, I mean, it's actually kind of the dynamic this season's been weird because now, one, I have an answer. You said, when's the last time Idaho won 3 games in a row? I was concerned I was going to have to go pretty far back in the schedule. It's not in 2024, 2025. That has not happened. This team has not won more than 2 games in a row. So fair point when we're talking about how Idaho finishes up the season. But the answer is Idaho won 3 games in a row from December 2nd, 2023 through December 9th, 2023, beating Cal Poly Pacific and Utah Tech last season.
Nice.
With the point standing being like, okay, like yeah, they just been up and down. So the thing I was going to get to though is the 500 teams are so weird to talk about because like when we were recording the episodes for Kloss, like it was, which I actually go out of my way to not talk about that anymore. This is more like a back house covering the team. When a team is catastrophically terrible, like you can use the animation of frustration to drive coverage and to drive people to want to listen to you, right? When the team is good, like football, it's easiest sell in the world. Everyone wants to know about the team doing well. 500 teams are just weird because I think everyone's pretty mellow in following Idaho basketball for the most part of understanding like a rebuild's going to take a few years. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people are just fine to watch a team be competitive. And like Idaho mostly has been competitive. Even when we talk frustrations, the teams evolve throughout the year. They're doing stuff different offensively to close the season than they were at the beginning of the season, in the middle of the season. That's the kind of progress you really do want to see. There are players who have taken clear developmental steps. Tyler Linhart offensively there are times where he looks like if he stays next year, if he can play good enough defense to be a starter, I mean, he feels like he could be a 15, 16 point a game scorer, which would be Idaho's first candidate for one of the first or second team all league teams in a long time. Because spoiler alert, Idaho's not going to get a first or second all league guy on their team this year. I just don't think they will. But the 500 basketball, it's a very up and down experience, but the fan base seems to be pretty, and our listeners, and we know from our Discord, patreon.com/TubsClub, people get it. They suck at defense. They're going to keep sucking at defense this year. Offensively, they can be good, but they can be hot cold depending on if they're going to be aggressive or not. And when they're not being aggressive, and I hate the phrase living or dying by the three. I think usually when people say that, they're actually making like an ethical, moral discussion about the sport. Because like I played basketball the late night as a kid, played in like high school in the early 2000s. When you shot a bunch of threes, what people and coaches said is that you were a pussy. So especially older people, when they're talking about living and dying by the three, what they're saying is, hey, your team is soft. But is fair talk about Idaho relying on the three too much earlier this year without putting pressure on the defense, getting the ball inside. But hey, that's changed. Long way of saying this team has been fun. I think they've been fun to watch. They clearly like each other, but just the rhythm of watching 500 basketball when you accept that's what you have is a little odd. But I think there's a reason why a lot of the fan bases accept this, Dallas. This is a thing we were talking about before we started the show. So Martin, come in for about 10 seconds. Martin, you were born in what year?
1994.
Okay, so Martin, you're 30, 31 in that era. I don't know when your birthday is, but you're somewhere between 30 and 31.
31, correct.
Martin, that's our crack stat team. Thank you. So since 1994-95, we're in our 31st basketball season from that time. Hey, Dallas, how many winning seasons does Idaho have?
In that time stretch, I'm going to say 6.
Well, Dallas, you're a little on the pessimistic side, but not much. 8. Idaho has 8 winning seasons since Martin was born. Ouch. If you go back, so like I was born in 86. If you go back to 86, there's 7. There's 7 more winning seasons. So 15 winning seasons in the last 38, which that goes so far back. That dates to Idaho's last NCAA tournament appearance back in 89-90, which is to say there actually hasn't been a ton of success in Idaho basketball. There's a run in the late 80s, early 90s. That was when we had like the Larry Eustace, Kermit Davis round 1 batch of coaches. Idaho hasn't really had that much success since then. Most of it coming in the Don Verlin time, when you and I lived through the Verlin time. It was okay. But I mean, even one of Verlin's best teams loses their first game in the Big Sky Conference tournament. This bring back to 2024, 25, right? This is why the fan base understands, I believe, that this rebuild is going to take a minute, and we're seeing the evidence, enjoying the games as they come. But 8 winning seasons in 30 years, I think people just get it, which is kind of a weird thing to say in the world of fans. But Dallas, I guess I want to ask you the question now. We both want Idaho to get that first round bye. Mm-hmm. If Idaho's to get a first round bye, they're going to play either someone like Portland State, Idaho State, Montana State, or Northern Arizona. Which of those sounds? I'm assuming you're like me, and Portland State is the big one you don't want. of those teams, what's the matchup you do want?
Man, I mean, I want to sit and pray and rain dance that we end up with Sacramento State. I know that's not going to happen, possible. But that was where I was up until about 2 weeks ago. I was kind of staring at that as like, hey, I want to see Idaho win a game in Boise. That's all I want. Now that we can't circle, hey, maybe they get Sac State. To me, Brian, at the moment, I'm going to go with Montana State, only because they did get the win right after New Year's against Montana State. That was in ICCU Arena. To me, I just don't think that's quite a deep enough team to do the same thing that they did last year of get in and then make a run to the championship game. I feel like that, to me, that's the one. You've beat them before. You've got a good shot to do it again. Hopefully you fight them hard on Monday night, March 3rd, to end the season. Maybe you get a win there, and then you've got 2 against them, and you feel real good. Hopefully going into a rubber match or third match in the playoffs. But that's what I would be looking at, Brian. Is I wouldn't mind Montana State at this point.
So I would rather have Northern Arizona, because Idaho has played Northern Arizona fine, both on the road and at home. I think Northern Arizona is probably on the outside. It's an outside chance. Northern Arizona needs some help to sneak into one of those spots. Of course, 500 teams give you help. That is the nature of the sport. I'm on the fence about Montana State and Idaho State. Maybe a little more Montana State, because Idaho State has a couple of guys, especially Dylan Darling, who I think should be easily first team All Big Sky, if not MVP of the season. Idaho State has a couple of guys that Idaho just doesn't match up with, and the type of athleticism Idaho State has, it's partially reminiscent of the Portland State matchup. Montana State doesn't have a single player who I'm concerned about turning the game upside down the way Dylan Darling can for Idaho State. Now you might say, well, hey, Trent McLaughlin, he's leading the conference in scoring at Northern Arizona, but he's a sharpshooter, which that matters, but Darling can create his own shot. McLaughlin doesn't really do that. Mm-hmm. So that's a way where Darling can impact the game by making shots, but also like getting other people open, which McLaughlin doesn't do. So yeah, I'd say Montana State, of the teams likely, Montana State's the team that you want. Now, I also want to jump in very quickly. Montana State 2-13 away from home this year. Yeah, I'm okay with that too. Montana State, they have won 4 of their last 6 in Big Sky play, but whatever. Mainly, I want to avoid Portland State. I'll take Montana State, and then I think Idaho. I want them to be on the side of the bracket Montana's on. Idaho just matches up better with the Montana Grizzlies. If in a dream second round scenario, where, hey, if Idaho gets that second round scenario, they probably have 15 or 16 wins on the season, at which point I'm cool with whatever happens. If Idaho gets to 15 is kind of my barometer of I really want 15 wins on the year. If Idaho gets there and they're playing Montana, who cares? But the Vandals played Montana tight twice, and they got their ass kicked against Northern Colorado last time. They absolutely face planted into the win against Northern Colorado in Moscow, and Northern Colorado was without their leading scorer at that time. So I just think that's the matchup. So hey, before we kick it to Martin, because we've been hanging out talking, the basketball season on the men's side, we have the other team to get to. Dallas, before we get into the tournament, any other closing points you want to bring up about the team?
I did want to ask you, Brian, Colton Mitchell.
Yeah.
What do we think? Is he sticking around? Gun to your head. What is his future on the team? A guy from Lake City, a guy who has now played at obviously multiple schools in Idaho. I would say is maybe the leader of the team. What do you think is going to go on with Colton Mitchell, and what is his trajectory moving forward?
Now I know what you're saying here. Like the subtext is, this is a point we have hit on the show, but I just want to bring it up again. the transfer portal fear that a lot of people have. It was exacerbated in football with Jason Eck leaving this year, but as a whole, the Big Sky has some people leaving football, but like your entire roster is not turning over. Basketball for about half the conference has been that dystopia of large amounts of the roster turns over in basketball real fast. So Idaho was opposite of that last season. A lot of Idaho's starters this year were starters who played meaningful minutes last year.
Mm-hmm.
A few guys did come into the program, guys like Jack Payne and guys like Colton Mitchell, he just said. Now, you're asking narrowly about Colton Mitchell. Now, the first thing I'm going to say is, without any inside knowledge, I think Idaho could have gotten Colton Mitchell as a true freshman, but Zach Kloss did no recruiting his last year. We're not here to talk about the bad old days because they're over and not worth getting back to.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that you just have to acknowledge that that is probably a fact about why Mitchell came to Idaho as a transfer. He was talked about in the last broadcast in Northern Colorado. He had a few schools, including like Eastern Washington, who offered him a spot when Mitchell transferred out of Idaho State. I think what's pointing you in the direction of Mitchell staying, I think that's your safest gamble, is he does not have the type of like raw athleticism that's going to explain why he goes to WSU or he moves up into a higher conference, like the Big Ten or something like that. He also is he's on a little bit more on the slender side. Which is say he's gonna want to get some muscle on him in the offseason for sure. But I think his type of athleticism, his size, just the fact of his game it's more Big Sky, low major. And I think Colton Mitchell he was at Idaho State in a system that maybe was not his favorite, because Looney's changed a ton this last season. And what Mitchell had in his year in Idaho State was absolutely not what Dylan Darling has this year at Idaho State. But I think, hey, if we think of it truly from a self-interest point of view, I mean, I don't know what school is going to be offering this like ocean of money to Mitchell. And he's a freshman starter playing a ton of minutes in his home state. So I think there's a lot of reasons to say why Colton Mitchell could stay. And I hope that's the case, because he's developed a lot this year. Early in the season, he had some very hot, cold moments, and his cold moments were just frostbite cold. But, I think honestly, kind of that Northern Colorado game when he had that huge 24-point first half was a big turning point. Now, he's still been up and down, but in the same spirit that I talked about, what I've interpreted the fans with Idaho basketball this year is people following a guy like Colton Mitchell. Like, it's weird that the Idaho fan base, there's times I want them to be more animated, but this is one time I'm happy. I think people get he's a redshirt freshman who got a medical red shirt, so he didn't play that much last year, and he was off ball last year. So freshman starting point guard is going to have some growing pains. Who gives a shit? Like, it happens. So long as we see growth, that's all we care about. And we've seen growth out of Colton Mitchell this year.
Well, so long as we continue to see the growth here, that's and again, this is a question that we'll have 6 months to think about. But it's just one of those things of like, hey, we've seen this roster turnover a ton up until this year. We're finally getting some continuity, but again, the fresh face, again, essentially freshman, hardly ever played point guard, is a guy I would expect to see as the face of the team for the next couple seasons at least. Yeah, and
the people we've talked to who are close to the team have said, this isn't like inside info, but it said generally the way the team looks is like, it looks like the guys like each other. And it looks like they get along very well and like playing with each other, which is that's not always the case, not just basketball, but other sports, other guys. Like, hey, there's like, for example, like when Giovanni McCoy, when we found out he transferred, that was like the least shocking thing in the world based off what we'd heard about, just him at school. Not to put down to the dude, but just the way he got along with people. The basketball team is a little bit different. Now, like, if he gets an offer he can't refuse, then you take it, right? But at this point, if your question is, hey, Brian, if you gun to your head, you got to put some money on this. Is Colton Mitchell going to stay at Idaho? I'd say the safest gamble is he's probably going to stay. But I just think that's the way a lot of the Idaho guys are this year. Idaho has a ton of solid players, but there's no all-star on this team right now. And I hope a good amount of the guys stay, because we've seen growth out of guys like, hey, Jack Payne at the start of the year looked like he was just an energy guy. He's developed into a relatively reliable scorer. Tyler Linhart's taken some steps where he looks a lot better. And he looked pretty good scoring last year. We talked about a ton last year. James Aldridge in the comment section saying, I genuinely don't think anyone on this team should transfer. Mitchell could be an Idaho legend if he sticks around. I mean, like, you've got to see development. The thing I will caution, this isn't a Colton Mitchell thing. This is just an everyone thing. When we watch a freshman perform, and talk about Giovanni McCoy again, just talk football. When we see a freshman perform well, it's easy to extrapolate linear growth from freshman year. Most players, that's not what happens. Now, if you talking narrowly about Colton Mitchell, are there ways you could say, well, I see where his growth comes from? Yeah, easily. He could get a little bit stronger. That's a big deal. He just looks. It took him a while to be comfortable. I think when you're the lead guard, you kind of have to work through looking for your shot and trying to run the offense, get other people their shots. As a young player, like, I think there's a learning curve there. It looks like he's got better. He understands his role a lot better. So, in theory, next year he comes back. He knows his role better. Well, there's not comfort to issues to work through. You don't have like the hot cold start to work through. So a reason to believe in growth for sure. But just keep in mind. Again, we talked about Giovanni McCoy. Giovanni McCoy had a fantastic freshman year. You and I both talked about it. Like, hey, he's probably not going to have better stats than he did freshman year. It's pretty hard to do that. You can see where Colton Mitchell could be better, but this is just always I think people should always keep in mind. Talking about underclassmen who contributed. Linear growth is kind of the exception, not the norm, unless it's a dude who didn't play much off the bench.
Cool. Brian, I think that's the only question I've got. I was going to ask you about Titus Year out and how he's done and getting a little bit more minutes recently, just for some of the more casual folks that haven't maybe seen the games, but we're a half hour in already, so I can save that.
I do want to say our insider tip from Line of Fire 95. I may or may not be neighbors with relatives of Mitchell, and I don't get the feeling he wants to go anywhere. You heard it first. He might not.
Coming to us hot from Line of Fire. That fire is red hot. Brian, any final thoughts on the men's team before we jump over to potentially?
I was about to say, like, no one can see this if you're not recording. This is a backhouse thing. I was about to send it to Martin, but he's not here. Maybe you do the ad read. He hasn't messaged us. Jesus Christ. Producing public. How about we just talk about Hughes River for a second? If Martin shows up, he shows up. If he doesn't, we'll handle this out a different way.
Yep, I see the message from Martin. My internet shit the bed, so get on it, Time Warner. I'm assuming it's still Time Warner in Moscow. I'm not going to have the video up for this, Brian, so we're just going to freehand it. If you are looking for a great all-inclusive week-long vacation, don't look past your backyard. Hughes River Expeditions has been vandal-owned and operated since 1976, and they're ready to take you on the vacation of a lifetime. Enjoy a multi-day trip down the Middle Fork of the Salmon, the main Salmon River of No Return, the Salmon River Canyons, or even the Selway. And you can check out special trips like one to see the Perseid meteor shower. Camp on pristine beaches, run amazing whitewater, hike scenic trails, spot wildlife, soak in beautiful natural hot springs. And guys, the same thing I say almost every single week. Fish some of the most remote stretches of river in the entire United States. Just bring your clothes and let HRE handle the rest. Grab a paddle, catch dinner, and ride the bull all throughout the Gem State. Call them now, 406-540-4450. Again, that's 406-540-4450. Or you can check them out at hughesriver.com.
Well, I'm glad I had a few seconds to get ready. Jesus Christ. So I guess I'm talking about the women's team too. So the Idaho women's team, now they had been on a similar trajectory as the men's team. And that again persisted in this last road trip, though there's different takeaways. So Idaho women start with a 70-65 loss, hosting Northern Arizona in Moscow. Northern Arizona, remember, they're 14-2 in conference. So Northern Arizona is pretty damn good. Idaho
top 5.
Yeah, but hey, Idaho, they kept it close. Like, this was a winnable game for Idaho. And honestly, Idaho led at halftime 34-28, which is a huge turnaround from what happened in Flagstaff. So 3 Vandals against Northern Arizona in double figures. Olivia Nelson with 11, Hope Hassman 13, and Anya Bukvik with 16. Then Idaho picks up a win over Northern Colorado, and women's basketball. If you're not deep into Big Sky basketball on the women's side, Northern Colorado's solid-ish on the women's side. They're 13-14 on the year after that loss to Idaho. Idaho, it was led against Northern Colorado by Olivia Nelson putting up 31. You can call that a rebound from a few games ago. Hope Hassman putting in 14, 4 Vandals scored in double figures. So where does that leave the Idaho women right now? 17-9 on the year, 9-6 in conference. Pretty clearly the number 3 seed, which if the conference tournament were to begin today, that would put Idaho matching up with University of Montana in that 3-4 matchup. And Idaho and Montana, they have, of course, played twice this year, and Idaho sits at 2-0 over University of Montana with 2 13-point wins. Dallas will hit a little bit more of the conference-wide picture, but hey, from this far away, with a pretty strong hold on third place right now, potentially playing a team that Idaho beat twice by 13, both at home and on the road in the first round of the Big Sky Conference tournament.
All right, sorry about that.
Hey, look at that.
Spectrum decided to shit the bed.
So I don't know if you've been listening, Martin. I ran through
Spectrum shit the bed.
Okay, well, I just
Spectrum?
ran through the women's team about how they lost. They had a narrow loss to Northern Colorado, 5-point loss. They led at halftime. Northern Arizona, yeah, led 34-28 at halftime, and then held on to Northern Colorado. The question that I had for Dallas, but I'll throw you, is Idaho sits at number 3 right now in conference. If the conference tournament began today, they'd be playing University of Montana. How do you feel about that matchup?
1 second. I'm going to put this up there so I can actually see it. Give me Northern Arizona. I will take them. I think after watching after watching them play on Thursday, the way they played against them from a month ago, where they lost like 106 to 76, something like that. So it was an awful score. Who gives a fuck? It was a month ago, but like the game plan they put together this time showed that I think they can beat Arizona game 3 in a third time around. I'd rather play them over, say, Montana State. Granted, might have a different answer come Monday after next week's show. But right now, I'd rather play Northern Arizona right now.
No, that's the side of the bracket you're talking.
Yes,
but with Montana State and Northern Arizona are clearly 1 and 2. There's going to be no shuffling there. So like phase 1, we're on the same page. I want Idaho on the Northern Arizona side of the bracket. But we're talking first round. There's still some shuffling on the women's side for that. It's technically second round, but would be Idaho's first game of the conference tournament. The team, first off, Idaho and Weber are 1 game apart from each other. Idaho at 9-6 in conference, Weber at 8-7. Your Idaho State, your Montana State, your Eastern, they are not going to be able to jump. They're certainly not going to be able to jump Idaho in the standings. So the Vandals are, for a fact, going to have a first round bye. It's more like jockeying for who they would play. The teams in play are pretty much Idaho State, Montana, and Eastern. Right now, Idaho would be slated for Montana first round. Is that what you would like, or would you rather have Idaho State or Eastern?
Right now, I think Montana. I know it. Hate to say how they're seeing. I know they've had kind of a weird season with their coaching situation. I feel most comfortable. I feel most comfortable playing them in Idaho's first game, just kind of based off how their past 2 games have gone. Idaho State, Seed, and Sobolewski teams are always going to be tough. They're always going to be scrappy. They're always going to give you their best, and they held Idaho to their worst performance of the year. And Eastern, I feel like we can beat them, but it's one of those I feel like I'd take Montana, no doubt, first right now.
Okay. So different question for you here, Martin. I talked on the men's side. Like, I just don't think there's a first team all conference men's player on the team, or first or second team. I just don't think that's the case. By the time we record first second team conferences should have been announced, honorable mention too, and then like conference player of the year. What players are you expecting to have their names called for first or second team?
For first, like I feel like the real two that have a shot for Idaho for first team is probably going to be Olivia Nelson and Hope Hassman, maybe outside shot of Jennifer Odland. But I feel like just given who's been playing well at what positions this year, I feel like some of those stuff might be locked up by other players on Northern Arizona and Montana State. So those are the two names you should get for first and second team. Others could see maybe or like a Rosie Schweitzer, going to be a Rosie Schweitzer given them. I think that's kind of the only other outside shot as another potential. Like I think those are kind of like the four names to maybe look out for.
Yeah, I think Olivia Nelson is a brain dead first team All Big Sky player. She's the number 2 scorer in conference play at 17 points per game. And anyway, she's been good essentially from wire to wire this season. Hope Hassman, she's kind of on that border. She's scoring 12 a game. She's clearly the number 2 option for Idaho. And Idaho is one of the top 3 teams. But I also think you're right that you're going to see a lot of Bobcats and a lot of Lumberjacks on those first 2 teams.
Yeah, it's going to be – make sure I can look this right now.
I was referencing conference stats.
Yeah, conference stats. Yep, looking at conference stats now. I'm blanking right now, Brian. Sorry. The other one I could see is maybe like a Jennifer Odland, but that one's going to be a very interesting one given I think there's another player at NAU that could probably get that spot.
Okay.
Martin, I have a similar question for you because I know how our viewership skews. The Discord is quite populated with women's basketball fans, but just women's basketball, the sport, is the one that's followed the least of the major sports. Which player should people really know come tournament time? Who's maybe the Stacy Barr or the Splash Sister equivalent of who is the person that's going to be?
The obvious one's going to be Olivia Nelson because this team although Hope Hassman has carried some teams, I think it's definitely the obvious answer is Olivia Nelson. She is, if she goes as this team goes, she kind of willed this team, it seemed like at some points. I know they didn't win against Eastern Washington. She willed them back. It looked like she was, like I think when I was at the game, it did not look, I thought she wasn't going to come back and play, but she came out and played that second half and gave them a shot at the end. It's like if this team needs a spark, they try and go to Olivia Nelson first, and she is the obvious kind of Taylor Pierce, Michaela Ferenz, Stacy Barr type that everybody should know about.
And then you mentioned Hope. Is Hope somebody you think could catch fire in the tournament?
She definitely can. I think she's kind of like, if they're going to be keying in on Hope, if they're going to be keying in Olivia, the next one to watch out for is Hope Hassman. She's kind of the next. She's, as kind of stats say, she's the next highest scorer on the team, averaging about 11, 12 a game. She's kind of the number 2 on the team when it comes to scoring. Yeah, James, I'll agree with you on that too.
We'll go with Anna P for anybody not watching live. James Aldridge in the comment section. I expect big things from Anna off the bench come tournament time. He listed her as Anna P because he was not going to try to spell her name, and I'm certainly not going to attempt to pronounce it unless Brian or Martin would.
I'll try to pronounce it. Somebody can correct me. Maybe another listener can correct me. It is Dallas. Maybe you can too after this. It is Ana Beatriz Passos Alves da Silva. I think I did that off the rip.
That was better than anything I could have came up with. Sorry, Brian. I'll let you take the wheel again.
No, I think we need a much longer discussion about Anna P. There's actually 2 Anna P's on the team.
Oh, Anna Pinero. The other one I can also quickly give a quick. But I think I'm assuming James is probably talking about Pinero, the freshman from Portugal. She is probably, and I think. I want to say Arthur has said this in a press conference. I can't remember which one, but I think she's probably the best pure defender this team has right now. Maybe a close second being like Anya Bukovic. I know she plays great defense as well, but Anna Pinero is probably the best defensive player I've seen at Idaho in a long time.
Yeah. Other point James brought up, Olivia Nelson, probably brain dead newcomer of the year.
Yes. Oh yeah, that is probably the
Actually really interesting story for her. Just she transferred from, I think it was like Central Missouri.
the Central Missouri Jennies.
Okay. Yeah, transfers in from Central Missouri and is averaging more at Idaho than she did at Central Missouri. So anyway, just kind of cool story. Kind of wish she'd been at Idaho for a little bit longer, but whatever. We'll
take the year that we got with her.
Yeah, we'll take.
I know she said that it was kind of I won't say a bad crummy situation. Like she said shaking her at the coaches show. She said that she wanted to. She might have stayed if it was given her major, but her school didn't offer it, and so she got to spend one great year in Moscow. So,
yeah, we're cool with that.
Yeah.
Whatever. It's anyway. Olivia Nelson. She's been an interesting story for the season. I mean, the women's team as a whole has been what I'd call an interesting story. Of the turnaround this year. This is a significantly better team than last season. If the Big Sky were not. Montana State right now is one of the best Big Sky women's teams we've seen in a long time to get on this show. They're very good. That's a team that could absolutely deserve a tournament invitation, even if the Bobcats lose in the Big Sky Conference tournament. That's not a common thing to say. But for Idaho to be sitting where they're at, all things considered, no, the women's story has been outside of football, kind of the best story for Idaho athletics of the major sports.
Mm-hmm. I know it's they could possibly have last year's stuff, and they could be stuck going 11-18. But yeah, it's great what the situation they're in.
Yeah. So we also had a question in the comment section about Moira's contract. I'm staring at it right now. He's just the head coach. He's not the interim head coach, but his contract terminates on May 10th, 2025. So expect an extension pretty damn fast at the end of the season.
Well, from a competent athletic department, sure. Right. But let's
expect the announcement.
Let's take a small step back on that one, Brian. As quickly is not maybe the word I would have used or anything indicating speed.
Let me rephrase this. Moira's done everything you want the guy on a 1-year contract to do. He deserves long-term stability.
Yes. I think he deserved long-term stability. I think he probably proved that in about week 3 this year. So hopefully the logical decision is made there. As Steve Kurt says in the comments, or he could go a year without a contract.
Shots fired, Steve. But you know what? Hey, so Martin, before we close it out, and hey, listeners, if you're starving for football news, it's coming. This was kind of a me thing. I talked to Dallas. I was happy to take a few weeks off of football. It's year round anyway, but I wanted a few weeks off. We'll get back talking coaches later.
We got coaches, we got signing day players. Yeah. We got stuff to talk about, but none of it's pressing, guys.
Well, yeah, the offseason football news is absolutely not pressing whatsoever. It can feel like it with as a viewer or as a consumer, a ticket buyer, whatever you want to call yourself, as an alum, it can feel pressing. It's not like we could talk, we could hold off until the week before the spring game. That's all that really matters. Martin, back to you. Anything else you want to talk about in women's team before we move on? You were kind of reacting, Martin, a second ago. I don't know if you're frozen because you're not moving. Okay. You had a reaction as though you were a little shocked by something when I went over Moira's contract.
It wasn't that. It was the 30-minute late text message I got from my internet service provider.
Nice. Comcast does those too. You may have an outage in your area upcoming. Started an hour ago, asshats. Good luck with that, Martin.
Yeah.
Well, if that's it, guys, we know what we're looking at. There's 3 games, both men's and women's side, to look at, all on ESPN, all on that lateral move, ESPN Plus. This Saturday, We have. I mean, if you're in Boise, try to get to the VSF Gala. I don't live in Boise. I can't make it. But Jonathan Jacobs, burning football question: Will FCS and the Kibby Dome be in NCAA 26? Let me light a fire on our patron base, patreon.com/Tubs Club. I don't play video games, so I know nothing.
I'm gonna say no. I don't want that to be the answer, but I'm gonna say no.
No.
Okay.
So thank you, Grandpa Brian, for letting the young kids take that question. Appreciate it.
You're gosh darn welcome, man. Okay. Well, hey, you guys, you know what to do for games. We'll be back next week where honestly, that'll be where we're previewing the Big Sky Conference tournament. Because that starts on March 8th. If you guys remember, the Big Sky changed up their bracket a little bit. Part of that was to make sure that the Big Sky, the championship game, which will be on a Wednesday for men's and women's side, the goal is to get better ESPN coverage and to have that championship game have less TV competition. There are things we can talk about, bitching about like what that means as far as getting people there, but whatever. Like there's always time to bitch on a show like ours. The first round games start on Saturday, March 8th. And then depending on where Idaho is, well, the women's team won't be playing until that Monday, March 10th. But by the time we record, we'll be ready to preview conference tournament stuff. So that's where we're at.
3 games apiece, everybody. We'll see if Idaho's men can get to 500 or possibly even better in conference in year 2 under Alex Preble. The women, there's again, they somehow lose all 3 of the games. They still go 500 in conference. Great second year or first year, I guess, for Coach Art Morer. But great second year after post John Newley. Gentlemen, we are well into Tubs After Dark, and I think we're all feeling the effects of starch madness, or maybe starch sadness, coming right around the corner. Go Vandals.
Go Vandals.
Pocatello. I got a lot of great friends in Pocatello, but there were just some ignorant people that were sitting behind our bench abusing the kids and me. You know, all I did was win there and leave there. And they're still bitter apparently 8 years later, which is their problem, certainly not mine. I've moved on, man. You know, like I said, I'm a vandal, man. You know, I'm a vandal. And 3 out of 4 years, that's pretty good. And they always said, is the grass greener? Hey, grass is greener in Moscow. 3.
Go Vandals.